So recently, there was a bit of an upset over this ship right here. Some people are going, "Oh my God, it's been nerfed! It's been nerfed!" And other people are like, "Finally, it's been nerfed." These Aries heavy starfighters, they're ruining the balance of the game. They're destroying the game. They got to get rid of them. And of course, CIG did a thing where they cut the alpha on the ion in half, but they upped the DPS, or they upped the rate of fire to maintain the DPS. So the rationale behind this in the patch notes, or in that set of patch notes for 316, was that they didn't want this thing going around one-shotting single-seat fighters, which is, you made a heavy fighter with a size 7 gun on it. What did you think was going to happen? I mean, what did you think was going to happen, CIG? So it's a little bit silly, but of course there have also been many other videos that have kind of made it onto YouTube. Oh, here's how quickly an Aries Inferno melts a hammerhead, how quickly it melts a caterpillar, or whatever, any of the larger ships, the ships that it is basically designed to attack. And people have reacted negatively to this as well. And to all of this, I say, let's just stop and think about what we're actually seeing and also what we're not seeing before we kind of go and say, get rid of it, nerf it into the ground. Let's take a moment to actually consider what is really kind of going on here. Now, the problem of that CIG highlighted with single-shotting single-seat fighters, or one-shotting single-seat fighters, I mean, just increasing the amount of shots from 1 to 2 to 3, whatever, really doesn't change anything. This is just kind of taking something like the Vanguard Warden and just bringing it up to that next level, to that next logical level. And this is it's just the cold hard truth of the small fighters, right? It's just, we've talked about this so many times, and so we don't really need to kind of go over it again and again and again. The inherent problems with Newtonian physics and 6 degrees of freedom, coupled with the intense firepower advantage and the hit point advantage that these heavier fighters have, means that this isn't something that's going away. This isn't something that you can kind of nerf out of existence. This is going to continue to become worse over time. The things that some of us warn you guys about when we say, hey, when you're looking at what to spend your money on, this is kind of a dead end. This is going somewhere. This is just that manifesting itself in the Star Citizen universe. We've talked about this in theory, and now it's becoming fact. But the problem with the larger ships, when you see them melting down these ships, and like, what's the point of having a hammerhead then? What's the point of having this, or what's the point of having that? Remember the stage of development that Star Citizen is in. Armor is not even a thing in the game yet. And some people, oh no, it is. It's there. There's hit point values. There's a little bit of hidden resistance, but it's not really a thing in the game that we actively interface with. It's not something that we can go and choose and say, I want this type of armor, I want that type of armor. Or perhaps in the future, to kind of steal some terminology from Star Trek, with our hull plating, could we polarize it? Maybe polarize it to one extreme, and all of a sudden we have better ballistic resistance. Polarize it to the other, and we get better energy weapon resistance. Something like that. Certain systems that could come into the game that could add a lot of depth of gameplay to kind of change these things up. The Ion is just in a place where it just coincidentally takes advantage of the lack of development that Star Citizen has in other areas. That is why the Ion is so extraordinarily powerful right now. It's not because the ship is just God mode overpowered. It's because there are certain things, when we're talking about Newtonian physics and other things, like the complete absence of a meaningful armor system in the game, that make this ship extraordinarily powerful right now. But it is probably something that is going to be severely reined in, not by nerfs or adjustments to DPS or any kind of that BS, but it's going to be delivered rather by the game systems actually coming into play. And this is something that you'll hear a lot of people, myself included, argue for, is that we want to see more of these systems brought into the game. It's important to keep things like balance in perspective and to make educated choices when balancing the game and saying what should be where and how things should work. We need to see these things functional, and so we can look at them and kind of pull them apart and say, this is what is working, this is what isn't working, and this is how we should change it. When you develop things like this in a total vacuum, where the other systems aren't there, it's very difficult to judge these things. Recently, CIG was talking about torpedoes and bombers. They're talking about, we got to put point defense turrets on the larger ships, and we're thinking about flat guns. They've been thinking about flat guns for about 5 years. At some point, it may turn into something. But, they recognize the threats that torpedoes pose, now that we've gotten to the point where big capital ships are starting to be seen in the game and players are bringing out bigger and bigger ships, of course, torpedoes are just swamping them because it's not just one bomber. Everyone recognized that gap years and years ago. And there's a lot of people out there who are just like, yeah, I got an Eclipse. Yeah, I got a Retaliator. Yeah, I got the Vanguard bomber. What was the name of it again? It's been so long, I've forgotten. But you know what I mean. It's just like torpedoes. Everyone recognized that was going to be a powerful thing. I mean, that's one of the big selling points of the Polaris. And so, of course, not having a fully developed game, or not at least having the framework or the foundation of all these systems in and around it, it's very difficult to judge these things without the other half of the equation, right? So when some people are sitting there and they're screaming about the Ion and getting one shot, remember that a lot of what balances the Ion is the things that CIG has thus far neglected to really put any effort into, right? And so realistically, of course, CIG is going to get a lot of negative feedback, because at the end of the day, they were probably sitting there, well, we could have done armor like 2 years ago, but we're waiting for the fancy new UI. And the new armor UI, it's going to be all 3D, and it's going to be floaty, and it's going to be high-tech looking, but it's still going to have a more of like a 80s sci-fi contemporary feel. And so we're just kind of trying to artistically work that out. We know you guys want the game balancing system in the game, but we really want to get the look right, the first times. And it's that kind of asinine prioritization of game development that leads to situations like this and leads to these kinds of misunderstandings. Even if something like the Ion was just grievously overpowered in the end, as a player, it doesn't make that a bad choice. Because remember, you are talking about a game where you are gambling with your character's life and with their assets every time you leave the station. Sometimes you don't even have to leave the station. Why not choose the best and strongest thing, the thing that is going to be more than likely to keep you alive, to keep your friends alive? Imagine, bringing your friends on your starship, and not just, to hang out and shoot the shit, but also be, you're going out and you're doing missions. If you choose a crappy ship and your friends all get killed because of it, because your ship isn't as resilient as it could have been, you're going to feel pretty bad, and people are going to start to think, I might lose things. If someone goes, we're going to go do a dropship mission, and one guy says, I've got a Redeemer, and the next guy goes, I've got the brand new Cutlass Steel. Which dropship are you going to get into if you might lose all your stuff? The Cutlass Steel or the Redeemer? You're going to get in the Redeemer. So Cutlass Steel, still a Drake ship. And unfortunately, Drake has been grievously underserved. One, by this weird idea that somehow Drake ships are just unarmored, which CIG just, I don't know, popped into their head one day, because that was never part of like the original design for Drake ships. It was always that they were rough cut and they were just kind of slapdash put together. It wasn't that they were unarmored, but somehow CIG got there. And when you look at that and you think, oh man, do I want to risk myself on that ship or that ship? You're going to choose the stronger, more armored ship that's more likely to survive the mission, right? And so choosing a ship, even if, some people might harp on you for saying, oh, well, of course you picked that one. That's the OP ship. I guess that's the kind of person you are, blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, it's called being smart. I mean, look, I don't even own an Ion. I don't own an Inferno. But I don't look at them and say, oh, I'm not buying them because I think they're OP and they ruin, like, the foundational aspects of the game. No, it's because it's a style of gameplay and something that is interesting, but it's something that I'll probably just acquire in the persistent universe at a later date. It's not something that is core to what I'm trying to build. But I wouldn't diss anybody who bought this, because it's a smart buy. It is a smart ship to buy. There are a lot of ships in Star Citizen that, quite frankly, because of a lack of thought and a lack of depth of systems, they're dogs right now. They're just absolutely crappy ships. And it's some of the ships that CIG puts the most fanfare into. And they're just not survivors, and they're just not practical in the universe that they're building. And that's why, sitting there and harping on someone for buying an Ion, don't harp on the person who bought the ship. Harp on the game developer who's kind of putting the ship out there before the game is really fully ready to handle the ship. And in a way, it's not too dissimilar from a situation like the Reclaimer or like the Herald. These ships were brought into the game and salvage didn't exist and data running didn't exist. And still to this day, they don't exist. But the counterplay to the Ion, the counterplay to the Inferno don't exist in the game either. Everything else works, but the counterplay doesn't exist. So of course these things they're just demons. They're just absolutely wrecking things. And in order to properly balance them, or to have an idea of what proper balance should be, we need those other systems in the game to make an informed choice. So CIG kind of saying, well, we don't want them one-shotting fighters, so we're just going to make a little adjustment to alpha and DPS. I mean, that's just paying lip service to the problem. The problem is this kind of like ramshackle game development, and the idea that, well, we have an idea for a system, but we've got bigger priorities right now, but we'll get around to it. Just enjoy the flaming car crash that is the game right now, or the game's balance.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.